Yo, what is up, guys? Your guy Shinobi here, back again with another video for you guys. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we got ourselves another reaction. And today, we're asking the question of, is Gamefreak ruining Pokemon? Now, before we get into this, I'm gonna be real with you. I'm just gonna keep it a real stack. I have been playing Pokemon all the way since I'm talking Red and Blue. Like, I've been playing that. I didn't play when I first came out because obviously I was born in 1998, so there's no way in hell I could play it when it first came out. But I'd say I probably started playing it around 2005-ish when I got old enough. So I was probably around 7, 8 when I first got my first Game Boy and something like that. And I was playing red, yellow, blue, and then we got gold and silver eventually because my grandmother found those kind of games in the Valley Village, the Goodwills, those good old days when you could find that kind of stuff. And then, it kept going and going. And I would say prime time for Pokemon had to have been back in I'd arguably say 2007, now that I think about it, just due to the fact that they had Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. I didn't have a DS back then. In fact, I didn't get a DS for a long time. If I can see if I'm doing the math right. Yeah, I didn't get a DS probably until middle school, high school. So, I would say probably around 2007, 2014 is when Pokemon was at its hypest points. Especially when they announced the Oros remakes. And let me tell you, even though I still love Pokemon to this day, the games ain't hitting the way they used to. And it's probably the reason why whenever I do Nuzlocks, whenever I do, stuff like that, I always play the older games. It's something about those older games that just, like, they felt like they had the passion in it. It felt like that they actually put their effort and time to it, compared to now where they're kind of just throwing them out because they know that Pokemon is so huge now and it's so big that no matter what, people are going to buy it, whether it be merchandise, the trading card game, the mobile games, the mainline games, the freaking, Pokemon Unite. Like, Pokemon is huge, bro, huge. So it feels like with the main games, and hell, even sometimes with their products, but if we're just talking about the main games, it feels like with the main games that they kind of just stop trying. Like, they put enough effort to get you interested in it, but they kind of just stop trying. And it really sucks. I'm not gonna lie, it does suck because they are releasing some games that people probably, back then would really want. Like, once again, we're getting a Pokemon X and Y pretty much remake or continuation pretty soon, and then on top of that, we got a Kanto remake, but with the, like Heart Gold, Soul Silver kind of features added into it. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, they damn near almost got the freaking features from Heart Gold and Soul Silver right, but then they screwed up on some things. It's like, they're there, but it's like they're not there, And I don't know. It feels like that they're not really putting in the effort that they used to. And it really sucks. Will they ever go back to the days where they were, going crazy with the stories and everything like that, and with the Pokemon, like in Black and White 2, X and Y? I don't know. Maybe it's just nostalgia, but who knows? I mean, I'm yapping a lot here, but I just have to put out my feelings about it, before we get into this, because while I still love Pokemon, I love the franchise, Game Freak and the people in charge, I feel like they've gotten to a point where they know they're going to be just printing money for their end until like the end of time with this series. So they kind of just stopped trying, at least with the mainline games anyway. But let's see what this guy's got to say. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave this guy's video down in the comments. You already know what it is. Let's go ahead and get straight into it.
Pokemon has always been my favorite franchise. I have sunk countless hours exploring the various regions,
Jesus Christ, man,
and building competitive teams.
The amount of time, bro, seeing the 3DS, bro, seeing the 3DS after all this time, holy crap, man. Seeing the 3DS after all this time, and hell, I recognize some of those demos too. This was, if I'm correct, this was a Pokemon. Oh my gosh, why is my brain? Where's my DS at? Where's my DS at? Gosh dang, it's probably sitting somewhere in my room right now. But this game, I'm pretty sure it was a mystery dungeon game. This game specifically was a mystery dungeon game that they had a demo for, and I still have the game for this. Good times.
So excited to see the new games get announced, and then waking up early morning on release day to play them. Every mainline Pokemon game felt like a genuine improvement.
Bro, when Pokemon Black and White came out, bro, and then they brought out Black and White version 2. This is around the time I had a DS at this point. Oh my gosh, bro. The hype was insane around this time.
To last. At least, that's how it was until they made the move to the Nintendo Switch. The games we received here are just lazy and rushed cash grabs. And this isn't a jab at Gamefreak, I just want my favorite franchise to receive the same love and care that other Nintendo franchises like Zelda and Mario do. When the Nintendo Switch originally released, it was revolutionary for every franchise. Look at Breath of the Wild. It was a fully open world
Bro,
game in which you could choose the order you fought every boss. There was so much customization that you could play the game over and over and have a different experience. You could even head straight to the final boss if you wanted to. Granted, it wasn't recommended, but you could do that. Breath of the Wild is highly regarded as not only one of the best Zelda games of all time, but also one of the best games in general. Then we had the release of Mario Odyssey, which introduced Cappy and the capture mechanic. It built upon the 3D Mario formula and shook things up completely with the capture mechanic. It also had some of the best platforming we had seen in all of video gaming, combining both 3D and 2D elements.
yeah, Mario games have always been kind of good at doing that, though. I'm not gonna lie. Mario games have just dominated that kind of thing. Like, if you look at even some of the older Mario games, they've been just masters of their craft when it comes to platformers. They really have.
In the first year of release, the Nintendo Switch was already establishing itself as the console that revolutionized franchises. I remember eagerly waiting for the next Pokemon game to be announced, and I didn't have to wait long because May 29th, we received our first look at Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee.
Now, these games, I'm not gonna, trash on, because I actually enjoyed playing through these games. Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. Peak game in my opinion. In fact, I feel like, let's see, with certain Pokemon games with the Nintendo Switch, they did them right, and then some of them they kind of just didn't try. Like Let's Go Eevee, they did an amazing job with this game.
And at first, I was optimistic. It was the first time a mainline Pokemon game was coming to the big screen. But this game wasn't a mainline Pokemon experience that we were imagining. This title was meant to introduce Pokemon Go players to the mainline games. The game was much simpler than other games. It removed wild battles and replaced them with a Pokemon Go style catch system. There were also no abilities or held items, but despite this, I actually enjoyed this title.
Yeah, this title, while it was for Pokemon Go, it was actually fun. This game, they did this game damn near perfectly. They brought us back to Kanto. And then they did it, and they did it in a unique way. Not to mention, once again, they did the following Pokemon mechanic correctly. Like Diamond and Pearl, the remakes they did for that, they kind of screwed it up. I'm not gonna lie, they kind of screwed it up. And I love Diamond and Pearl. Diamond and Pearl is probably one of my favorite regions. I would say, arguably, outside of Gen 5. But there was a lot that they could have done with Diamond and Pearl that they should have done.
Vibrant, and the remastered music was a great addition, and I loved how the Pokemon were actually scaled properly in the overworld and in battle, but I wish I could say the same for what came next. Pokemon Sword and Shield, the move to the next generation, the first mainline Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch.
This game was decent at best for me. If I'm putting my opinion out there, this game was decent at best for me. It was definitely fun. I had my fun with it. And every once in a while I still go back to it, but it's not one of them games that I still play a lot of.
And to put it bluntly, the game was just boring and lacked ambition. I'm going to break down my issues into 3 components: the pacing, the environment, and the generation changes with the Pokemon. One of the big issues I had with the game right away was the constant hand-holding. I kid you not, this game took me over a year to play because playing it just felt so draining. You would arrive to a new town and just have Hop hold your hand through it all, telling you what to do. Then there was the route design. Despite it looking more open, this was probably the most linear game in the entire series. Literally look at the map. You start
the map, it literally tells you to go up and down. And you don't really get anything new until you get the DLC. It's literally just an up and down map. Which I guess would be easy. I guess that, like, here's the thing with Pokemon. We all know Pokemon's for kids. Let's be real. It's for kids and adults, but it's mainly aimed at kids. So they try to make it easier on purpose for kids. But I don't think Game Freak realizes that the people that's been playing their games are adults now. I don't think they've realized that. That a lot of the people that play their games now, their mainline Pokemon games, they're not kids. While there's a huge audience of them that do, a lot of the people who've been playing these mainline series games have been playing them probably as early as 1998, even before that. Like, come on, bro. We're not done. We are veterans at this already. We are veterans at this game at this point. Let us explore the way we want to explore. Like, the way that you're able to, just roam around, do whatever, and do the gym badges whenever and however, or not the gym badges, but do whatever you want, like in Zelda and whatnot. Allow us to do that with Pokemon. Allow us to do that with the Pokemon games, man.
Down here, and this is where it ends. It's literally one big straightaway. And then we had the towns, which despite looking huge and full of life, were just dull backdrops with only a few buildings you could actually enter. For example, let's take a look at Hammerlock. How many buildings do you think you can enter and interact with?
Damn. Shit, I can't know. I don't know, Frick.
The answer
Arguably, before you mix the answer, I'd probably say I didn't enter that many buildings in that town. I'm gonna be real. I'd say arguably probably 10, maybe. I didn't enter all the buildings, but I'd argue maybe 10 max.
is 12. And this
Oh,
might seem
okay.
like a lot, but one of those is a gym, 2 of those are a Pokemon Center, and 3 of those are cosmetic item stores. Now you might be thinking, well, there are still 6 buildings we can enter and explore, and you're right. But the thing is that all of these are pretty much the same building, just copied and pasted over. A lot of the buildings are just hit with the landlord special, with a simple different color exterior. On top of that, a lot of the towns had a ton of fake doors, which wouldn't have mattered as much.
And see, yeah, that's the thing that sucks. Because in older Pokemon games, damn near every single door you could go into. With older Pokemon games, there was no limiting of anything. They designed every single place in the city. Everything. Like, if you go back and play some of the older games, you'll be hard-pressed to find a door where it's a fake door you couldn't enter. You'd be really hard-pressed.
Much if the buildings we could enter had more personality to them. These type of things weren't too jarring in the 2D games, but it really sticks out at you in 3D. This game also introduced the wild area, which was supposed to be an open world portion of the game with changing environments and weather and all that cool stuff, and this place just ran like absolute dog water. Pokemon would pop in left and right, which there was even an added sound effect for this. The frame rate wasn't consistent, and it was just super barren, which was a problem that carried over to future games. The game also wasn't...
Now, see, here's the thing. The thing with this... And yeah, he is correct on what he was talking about. But the thing with this is the Nintendo Switch is not a high-powered system whatsoever. And that's not a defense for this game at all. Because that just means that they should have spent more time smoothing out the stuff to make it to where it's not as choppy. But still, like... This was honestly to be expected. I'm going to be real. Now, me personally, I think they should have done a better job. And me personally... I would have waited a longer time if they could have smoothed some of this stuff out, because that area could have been a lot better looking. But that's just me.
Graphically impressive. A lot of the textures look blurry and just unpolished. And I know some of you will blame the hardware limitations of the Switch, but that wasn't it. Look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Exactly.
Those games were huge and did so many crazy things, and yet they looked phenomenal and were able to run fine. Sure, they had barren landscapes at times, but it fit the game's narrative and story. Exploration was fun and rewarding. Tears of the Kingdom had so many mini-bosses, bokoblin camps, shrines, and other things to keep you interested. Another big issue with this game and every Pokemon game moving forward was the static Pokemon. Pokemon Sword and Shield's wild area was just bland. Pokemon would be there roaming around, but that's about it. They were literally just there as NPCs pretty much. I would have loved to see a wild area be something like the Monster Hunter games, where it's lively and actually looks wild, as the name suggests, where you can see creatures fighting each other, running away, interacting with the environment.
That would actually be cool. That would actually, and I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Power World do something like this? Didn't Power World do something like this, where you will see the Pokemon interacting, or not the Pokemon, but I guess the pals interacting with each other? Hell, I'm pretty sure, if I'm correct, I was just playing Wuthering Waves a couple days ago, but in Wuthering Waves, even though it's a gacha game, it's completely different, it's still open world. Everything interacts with each other. Everything. Especially in Renacita. If you go to Renacita, you'll quite literally see the Echoes fight each other for a while. Actually, no. Even in just the regular, in the 1.0 areas, if you go to the 1.0 areas, sometimes you'll see the Echoes fighting each other. Why Pokemon hasn't done it? Once again, I was talking about it in the beginning of the video, I think they started getting lazy around this point.
It's like that. This game also had the bright idea to cut the available Pokemon as well. You remember the famous tagline for Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all? Well, if you played these games, that was literally impossible.
Dude, this game, they cut out like a lot of the national decks, which is beyond, I don't know why they did this.
I never understood this. X and Y had something similar, but then they introduced the Pokebank and allowed you to transfer Pokemon from earlier generations onto Pokemon X and Y. Every single Pokemon was available. This game just straight up made them unavailable because get this, they wanted to focus on updating the animations and models of the Pokemon to the new HD hardware, which look, totally understandable.
Which once again is why I said, in my opinion, I would have rather them wait like a year or a year and a half to get all the stuff that they need to get smooth out. Like, I would rather them smooth all that stuff out, get all the Pokemon in, smooth out the textures, get all the stuff ready, than to push out a half-baked game, because it feels like that they were rushed on this. With this game, it feels like they were rushed. Like, if you look back on hindsight, it feels like that they got rushed with this game and that they could have added more, but they didn't because they didn't meet a deadline.
Long as then when they do have those models, they release the Pokemon in a form of free DLC. Oh wait, that never happened. Oh, and you're telling me that the Pokemon they did release later down the line were locked behind paid DLC?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Starting to make sense now. This change was so upsetting to see. The whole new animations was just a cheap excuse because the game was built on the same 3D models from X and Y.
Yeah, from X and Y.
The same models they had been using
exact
for the
models.
past 6 years. And people were tired of these cheap animations. Most Pokemon just looked bland. They were just standing around and had no cool movement to them. Literally, compare the movement from Pokemon Stadium, a game that released 25 years ago, to this. Battle animations were also not impressive whatsoever. Again, this was fine on the 3DS when they had just made the move over to 3D.
They're literally the only battle animation that you could say looks really cool is Scorbunny's final, like, attack Pyro Ball. That's the only one you really see them put any effort into.
For the first time, but this is a whole new system that is leagues above in terms of power compared to the 3DS. So why are we still getting the same 3DS quality animations? The answer is laziness. And before some of you start typing that the Switch hardware was a limitation and so on, look at Mario Odyssey. Look at Breath of the Wild. Even look at Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate on the 3DS. Those games did so many crazy things. Even Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64 had arguably better animations than this game. I also found the story of these games to be really disappointing and, like the game itself, rushed. Nothing really happens until the end when, spoiler alert for those who haven't played the game, Chairman Rose decides to reveal his true colors and sets Eternatus free, bringing upon the darkest day. I know it's hard to always come up with a unique twist, but this really felt like a cheap Lysandre ripoff.
Bruh.
Yeah, pretty much. It was just Lysandre trying to bring out freaking Xerneas or Yveltal, and even then there was no real stakes to it. I'm gonna be real. With like Lysandre, like with Pokemon X and Y, you had a chance of like the world getting destroyed by a cannon that AZ made and everything like that. And they even touched on the lore back in X and Y on the Pokemon War, which they also touched in, by the way, in the Lucario movie or the Mew movie or whatever they want to call that one. But like, you compare that to Sword and Shield. I'm gonna be real with you. They didn't really cook with the story. Even like, that's the thing I was talking about before, where I was talking about them putting effort into their games. Like, even with the plot and the villains and everything like that, they put more emphasis in the other games before the Nintendo Switch games than they did in these ones. Every single game, from Pokemon, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, all the way to the ORAS remakes, they put effort into that shit. Hell, I even say, actually, not even just the ORAS remakes, the Sun and Moon remakes too also had some plot and stakes in them. Especially when you came out with the second games, which were Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, where they really went deep into it. Like, it was really good. They weren't perfect by any means, but they showed that they put at least some effort into it. And that's with more limited hardware on the 3DS than they have on the Nintendo Switch. So, once again, I was talking about it before, but I feel like they kind of just stopped trying after the Nintendo Switch came out. I don't know why.
Was also really boring. They weren't really an evil team, but just annoying hype men for Marnie, and I really think that in order for this climax to really hit, we needed some rising action. Look at Pokemon Emerald, for example. The whole time we were fighting off both Team Aqua and Magma, we invade their hideouts, and then they both released chaos upon the world with the legendary Pokemon. They really felt like a menacing threat. The only reason that the story felt as good as it did was because of the build-up we've been having along with those teams. Whereas this twist,
yeah, there was no build-up.
Doesn't really add anything unique to
there
the
was
story.
literally no
Despite all
build-up.
of this seeming like a rant, I do gotta give credit where credit is due. Gamefreak still has it when it comes to Pokemon designs. I really enjoyed the new Pokemon. I think this generation introduced some really...
I'm gonna be real, that's the only kind of thing they do right, is when it comes to Pokemon designs, they're still trying with those. They're at least attempting to try with those. You gotta give them credit when it comes to that. They're at least attempting to try. They may not be as good or maybe not as iconic as some of the older ones. I know people got their favorite regions. Me personally, like Gen 4 and Gen 5. But they at least attempted.
Pokemon, even some with some really unique type combos like Dragapult, Grimmsnarl, and the Appleton lines. And the one thing Game Freak has that has never ever missed is the music. I really enjoyed the
Yep, that
soundtrack to
too.
these games. And then
Soundtrack
Legends
go
Arceus
crazy.
was announced, and I was so excited. Finally, an open world Pokemon game with new battle mechanics.
I'm gonna be real. My thoughts on Legends Arceus is it's a fun game. I'm gonna be real. It's just a fun game, at least for me. I had fun when playing it, but it's not one of them games that I'll be playing often, you know? It was a fun game while I was playing it, but it wasn't one of them games that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be grinding this out for a minute. But it was fun while I was playing it. It had some unique stuff.
And animations. It was going to be set in Sinnoh, my favorite region, and despite the trainer looking a little rough, we knew gameplay wasn't finalized, and this looked like such a good concept. And then the game was released, and that's what it felt like, just a good concept. The game was open world, sure, but it still suffered from the same issues the wild area and Sword and Shield suffered from. The world was barren and didn't really have anything going for it. There was no reason to explore the various areas, and the map just lacked diversity. Look at Pokemon Black and White. We had seasons, a cave that is charged with electricity, a different cave with a legendary Pokemon, multiple towns, each with their own charm and personality. Legends Arceus lacked all of this. We had one cave, and it had literally nothing going on.
I don't remember this, but yeah, that's rough.
Compare this with Elden Ring's open world. This game had so much content that you could easily miss if you just focused on the main story. There were dungeons, forests, castles, caves, mines, various bosses, and so much going on within the world, and the world was just memorable. It felt real. You really felt like you were in there. I played this game for over 100 hours and I still feel like there are areas where I have yet to explore. And sadly, I cannot say the same about Legends Arceus. The reason Elden Ring, Tears of the Kingdom, GTA, and other open world games are so highly regarded is because the world is actually lively. An open world game needs to have areas of interest and reward those players for going to those areas. Scarlet and Violet attempted this with the spears you released to encounter the legendaries, but I still think that wasn't enough to really make the players feel like it's worth their time. The game also looked like dog water, with Pokemon looking like a bad stop motion if you watched them from a distance. Pokemon would just roam around and not really interact with their environment, the same issue that we had in Sword and Shield. And sure, there was some level of personality, but look at what they did with Pokemon Snap. Even the N64 version had Pokemon interacting with their environment more than a Switch game. So there is no way that the issue is hardware limitations. Then we had the graphics, which looked arguably worse than those on Sword and Shield. I know some of you will say it's just the art style, and sure, that can play a role, but there is no reason this game should look graphically worse than a GameCube game. Now, Pokemon games aren't known for their phenomenal story, but this game was just so repetitive. You would travel to the new area, catch some Pokemon to add to your deck, calm the frenzied Pokemon, and repeat this for all the areas. It literally felt like they coded this part of the game and just hit copy and paste over a few times just to pad out the game. And look, I know you can make this argument for every Pokemon game. You would visit a new town, defeat the gym leader, and then rinse and repeat. But the difference between those games is that there was a lot going on in between those gym battles. We had interesting environments.
That is true. There was a lot going on. It wasn't just go to one area, beat the boss, move on. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on in between that. There was a lot of stuff going in between that. Whether it be with, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, you finding Team Platinum doing some crazy crap, or maybe, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, having Suicune pop up every once in a while. Hell, with Pokemon Black and White too, once you hit the Thunder area, the weather would literally change based on if Thunderous or Tornadus was there. There was a lot of stuff that was going on. A lot of, like, side quests or mini missions that would go on.
We had rival battles, we had encounters with the evil team, which this game just lacked. It isn't all negative though. I did enjoy the noble fights and how the player had to calm down the Pokemon before we could battle it. I also enjoyed how the wild Pokemon would attack the player and how the Pokemon were more true to size. And I also really like this new format Gamefreak is going with. And I do think this would make for some fun gameplay, but it just needs to have more time and care put into it. And that's kind of the biggest issue that I have.
Probably that's every Pokemon game on the Nintendo Switch is they need to stop with the yearly releases and just finish the game and then put it out, honestly. Like, we live in that kind of era right now where we, like, for some reason, people, like, these companies just keep putting out half-baked games and then having to update them over time, or in this case, with Pokemon games, not update them, so they kind of just stay looking this way. But I would prefer, once again, that we get more time put into the game, even if I have to wait a little bit longer to get a good game, than to have a half-assed version of it.
With this video. Then we got the Diamond and Pearl remakes. which weren't handled by Gamefreak but rather Ilka. Regardless, they are still Pokemon games, so I'm going to cover them here too. As I stated before, Sinnoh is my favorite region in all of Pokemon, so seeing it get fumbled really hurt. My issue with these games is that they were literally just upscaled ports of Diamond and Pearl. Not Platinum, the better experience, but the original Diamond and Pearl. This means that they also suffered from the same issues that the original Diamond and Pearl had. For example, the lack of Fire-type Pokemon. In case you didn't know, the original Diamond and Pearl only had 2 options for Fire-type Pokemon, Rapidash and Infernape. So if you didn't pick Chimchar in the beginning, there isn't much of a choice to fill that spot. But you see, Platinum fixed this. It brought over Magmar, Slugma, Flareon, and one of my personal favorites, Houndour. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl did have these Pokemon available, but they were locked away in the Grand Underground Grotto.
Yeah, they were. A lot of Pokemon that were down there were pretty much locked down there. You can only unlock them after you beat a certain amount of gyms. Also, you couldn't get Glaceon or Leafeon still to this day. Which is crazy because, you know, in the newer Pokemon games, on a Nintendo Switch, you can basically evolve them using a Leaf Stone or an Ice Stone. Versus with this game where you basically can't even get them until you beat the Elite Four.
And we're only
but technically, it's only Glaceon. Leafeon you could get if you go back.
Accessible when using certain statues in your base. So rather than just adjusting the regular map encounters, the developers wanted you to go through this long process just to solve an issue that Platinum had already solved. These are just some examples. Platinum also had a better story, gym leaders had stronger, more unique teams, the story had better pacing. There were just so many quality changes made to Platinum that made it the best Sinnoh experience, and yet despite this, Ilka decided to stick with the original Diamond and Pearl.
Which is crazy because they had Platinum right there as the template. As much as I enjoyed playing through Diamond and Pearl, and I even did a Nuzlocke, I'm pretty sure, on the game, with the remix, I'm pretty sure I did a Nuzlocke. As much as I enjoyed playing through this, it's like, they could have done so much more. They didn't even bring back the Battle Tower. Or my bad, they did bring back the Battle Tower, but they didn't bring back the Battle Frontier. And as far as the difficulty of the game, it doesn't start getting hard until you get to the Elite Four, where they have maxed EV and IV trained Pokemon. Especially Cynthia. I would prefer that if every single gym leader had that way. But only like maybe the last 3 gyms have it that way, and it's not even completely maxed out EVs or IVs, it's only maybe some of them that are that way.
Platinum had also brought back the Battle Frontier, which replaced the Battle Tower we had in Diamond and Pearl.
Oh, so I was right, we don't have the Battle Tower. So we do have the Battle... Wait, am I dumb? So we had the Battle Tower, but not the Battle Frontier. Am I dumb?
Huge change for players looking for more of a challenge. The Battle Frontier had the original Battle Tower, along with 6 other buildings with their own unique battle moves. Now, would it surprise you to know that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl didn't have the Battle Frontier, but just the Battle Tower?
Yeah, I was right. Okay, I was right. So they didn't have the Battle Frontier, but they had the Battle Tower. It's been a while.
And it's crazy, because Game Freak received a lot of backlash when they first released Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire with no Battle Frontier. That game had the Battle Mason from X and Y, which was a lot more simple than the Battle Frontier.
Yeah, and by the way, me and my brother, when we got Pokemon X and Y and they got the Battle Frontier or the Battle Tower, we grinded the hell out of that.
Emerald. But the thing that sets ORAS apart from BDSP is that it was actually a proper remake with a lot of quality improvements over the original Ruby and Sapphire experience. First, it had an updated...
For me, I never played the Mega Ruby or Alpha Sapphire. Or Ruby or Sapphire. Hell, I never played Emerald. Those were the games I didn't get to play. Because we couldn't find them. So playing through Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire for the first time for me was pretty good.
Story that involved the introduction of Kyogre and Groudon's primal forms. It also introduced a Dex Snap, which is a fun way to encounter Pokemon with higher IVs, hidden abilities, and even shininess. It allowed you to fly all over Hoenn.
This was probably one of the best features. This ability to be able to fly all across the map with Latios, or Latios, depending on who you choose, one of the best features this game ever made. I'm surprised they didn't import it into the newer ones.
The Latios or Mega Latias, and it brought over previous Megas and even introduced new ones.
Mega Gallade was freaking good. It's still to this day.
It had a phenomenal post-game.
Mega Gallade was freaking goated.
BDSP had none of this. Instead, we received the same post-game from Diamond and Pearl, along with the ability to fight legendaries in Ramona's Park, and a super cool battle with Giratina in the Distortion World. No, we don't get to roam around there. Not including the Distortion World in the game was such a fumble. I remember seeing the Giratina movie when I was a kid and obsessing over the Distortion World. Then we had the chance to go there in Platinum and do some clever puzzles with the Lake Trio. This is just such a missed opportunity. In my opinion, I believe that a remake should be the definitive way to experience that game. Look at Pokemon Gold and Silver. Everyone would much rather play Heart Gold and Soul Silver just because the quality changes and improvements that came along with it. And I sadly can't say that BDSP is the superior Sinnoh experience. Its only redeeming value is that it's readily available on the Switch, and Platinum is just really expensive nowadays.
Yeah, no. If you want to try and get Pokemon Platinum now these days, good luck. Good freaking luck. That shit, especially if it's still in the case, is gonna cost you a couple hundred, if not more.
Then we got the latest game in the franchise, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and you guys have seen the memes. This game was just so badly optimized and it just ran horribly.
You just look at the animations, bro. Just look at even the kids swinging their feet around, bro. Go back to that.
The latest game in the franchise, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and you guys have seen the memes. This game was just so badly optimized and it just ran horribly.
How?
I don't mind the occasional frame drop, but when
How?
the game feels unplayable or you lose immersion due to the frame drops, then that right there is an issue. This game also had the same issues as all the other games with the Pokemon in the overworld, where Pokemon just roam around and don't really interact with their environment or each other. The Pokemon Snap remake on the Switch did this perfectly, and I know it's easier to program this since you are kind of on a set track looking at set interactions, but I still think that they can find a way to implement something like this in their other games. Another area that was absent in all of these games is a proper post-game. Look, X and Y had the whole storyline with Looker where you help him investigate certain cases.
Bro, I forgot all about that. Yeah, no. Pokemon X and Y did have that whole thing with Looker that you had to do. And then, yeah, you know, that's Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, the whole thing with Rayquaza. Diamond and Pearl, you had all the things with the legendaries. Heart Gold, Soul Silver, you had all the Suicune stuff. That was a lot.
Ruby had a Delta chapter where you end up going to space and fighting Deoxys. Scarlet and Violet had nothing going on besides gym leader rematches and Terra raid battles. It really feels like they just cut out the post game, expanded on it, and then sold it to you a little bit later as paid DLC. Pokemon Legends ZA is releasing very soon, and although I'm optimistic, I won't be surprised if it's just another disappointment. Just from looking at the trailers, it looks like they took a step back and brought back the wild area, except this time, they put it in Lumio City instead of the Galar region. Gamefreak also has decided to put these fences with levels around the areas where Pokemon spawn in the city, which I don't like since it just breaks immersion in my opinion. Just have the Pokemon there, or even better, have the wild Pokemon roam the city, instead of them only having like a designated corral. Some of the Pokemon here look less NPC-like. In the trailer you can see a Trubbish and a Gerborder in an alley, so I wonder if they are working towards fixing this NPC-like issue. But then again, there are other Pokemon that are literally just standing there, so who really knows? But I also want to talk about the animations, because there is no reason that a game releasing in 2025 should use the same cutscene transition to a different part of the map as GTA San Andreas. Okay, maybe not the same, but you guys see the resemblance, right? I'm also worried about the game only taking place in Lumio City. Previous titles have already had issues with repetitive assets and textures, so it's going to be really easy for Gamefreak to just hit copy paste all over again. There's also the issue about the diverse environments. If it's all in Lumio City, I'm worried that it's going to be all pretty much the same, and it's going to be...
If they only make this game Lumio City and Lumio City only, this will be the biggest fumble of all time. That would be a complete step back from what Pokemon X and Y did, where not only could you explore Lumio City, which was huge, I might add, but then you can explore the whole entire map of Kalos. This should be a game bringing us back to Kalos, not just bringing us back to Lumio City. Especially if we're talking about having some stuff centered around Zygarde. There's no way that they just said, let's take a game based on Kalos, a region that everybody liked because of the Mega Evolutions especially, and on top of that, how big the world was, the new typing being Fairy, which was huge, and we're just going to go and shrink that all down to Lumio City. That would be really stupid.
Be another Legends Arceus situation with where the game just kind of got boring and repetitive. But then again, I could be wrong, who knows? I really believe that all that Game Freak needs to do is just allocate more time into their games and take notes from other games in the industry that have been positively received. They knew fans wanted an open world game and they gave it to us, but I don't think they realized what about an open world game people like. It's clear that they have good ideas, but they're just not fleshed out since they are putting out a new game every so often. All they need to do is have more time and more passion into these projects. And look,
honestly, if they were to do maybe a 2 to 3 year cycle for every single Pokemon game, well, that would take a while. I feel like that we would get some better Pokemon games. I'm not gonna lie. If they were to do a 2 or 3 year cycle on some of these Pokemon games instead of a 1 year cycle, I feel like they do better. They'd have way more than enough time to actually get the games going, to fix the bugs, everything. And if they also want to add some new ideas, they would have time to do that too. The 1 year cycle just doesn't work. It just doesn't work, man. I know that they could probably get away with doing that with, the older games, but that's also because they take less resources to make with everything with the Nintendo DS. But now that we got open world games and everything like that, they need to invest more time because now they have to put more time into making the animations look good. Making the tree like they didn't have to try with all the environments and everything back then. They had to make them look decent at best, but they didn't have to go crazy with them because it was on the DS and Nintendo 3DS. Now you have these games that are on the Nintendo Switch and now the Nintendo Switch 2 that is out right now. And I'm gonna be real, they need to clutch up for real. Now, Lumio City looks pretty decent. Looks all right. It's not looking like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but we'll have to see when it comes out. But
I'm not a developer, but if other
we'll
games
see.
can do this, I believe the highest grossing franchise can do this as well. Thank you all so
They
much for
can.
watching and really.
And that's the crazy thing is people make excuses for this, but bro, we're talking like I'll say the same thing that I'll say about Genshin. We are talking about a multi-billion-dollar company. There is no way. There is no way with the amount of money that Pokemon brings in that they haven't put all their resources into making the best game possible. The only reason they have not to is because they're greedy and that they want to put the least amount of effort in to get the most amount of profit. That's the only excuse that they have because there's literally no excuse. But without further ado, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know. All the comments down below. Am I right? Am I wrong? Is this guy right or wrong? But considering the upvotes, I think that this guy's kind of cooking. I'm not gonna lie. He made a pretty good video too. So, yeah, no, without further ado, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.